Jack,
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
It's been a long time in coming. I've wanted to talk about this book for a really long time. This is the third time I've read it. You said before we started recording, second time you've read it. Eumeswil by Ernst Jünger. It's a fantastic book, completely bizarre. So I'm here with Brad Kelly of the Method and Madness podcast, of House of Sleep, the novel. Is your next out yet, or are you just publishing it a few chapters on Substack?
I have a chapter on the first chapter is on Substack, and I'm not sure when it's actually coming out, to be honest. So it will come out at some point, by hook or by crook. Mid 2026. If it's not out, I don't know what the heck I'm doing with myself. But so you can definitely check that out. Substack, Brad Kelly-esque. That's ESQUE.substack.com. You can check out Method Madness is all there, and also some of my writing. First chapter of my upcoming book, The Earthen Dark, is on there. Some writing on the tarot is on there as well. So yeah, check it out if any of that sounds interesting to you.
Yeah, I expect most people listening to this will know who you are. But
that's cool.
For those few who don't know who Brad is, I really, really recommend checking him out on Substack, on Twitter, checking out his podcast, checking out his writing. It's all great. But yeah, you've been on the show a few times.
Yeah, no, this is one of my favorite shows to come on. So I'm glad you reached out, and I'm super excited to talk about this book.
Yeah, Eumeswil, it's a book that, so Jünger I see getting talked about more than before, even in just the few years that I've been paying attention to him. But I still don't think he's talked about enough as a novelist, particularly. And then even within the context of people talking about Jünger, they tend to focus on his early life and his early works like Storm of Steel, War as an Inner Experience for the weirder people. But it tends to be on his earlier, much more militaristic, probably proto-fascist works.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Not focusing on what I think is by far his more interesting period is really post-Second World War, or Second World War onwards, sort of on the Marble Cliffs and onwards. And he got more interesting, at least in my mind, as he got older, as he got more burned out by the temporal world and more interested in the inner landscape. And
as he went through the Forest Passage, I think.
Yeah. If people are wanting a deeper dive on Junger's life, which, I mean, we'll probably reference, but I don't want to go through the whole thing because it's so long.
Yeah, he's 103 years old when he passed away. So
yeah. Art of Darkness podcast that Brad was formerly on has an excellent episode on Jünger. It's called something like Junger's Stereoscopic Vision, or
yeah, that's correct.
Something like that.
Yeah,
that will cover everything you could want to know about Jünger. The guy had a truly remarkable life, the sort of life that doesn't sound like it could possibly be real.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, yeah, World War I, literal war hero, changed, and in fact, I don't have all these details at my fingertips, but I believe he actually made innovations in how trench warfare was carried out that he was asked to write in detail.
Oh, really?
And he wrote some trench warfare and this was before he became known culturally as a writer, right? It was just this guy's smart, he can communicate, and he understands warfare. So literally that legitimate war hero, even if maybe people out there think he was on the wrong side, and that's fair, but also participate in World War II in a real way, and then lived until 1998 or something like that.
Yeah.
So saw it all, and was also a favorite of a number of people. Later on in his life, I don't know when people really started talking about him in the English-speaking world, but later on in his life, there were writers who would sort of make a pilgrimage to see him. Jorge Luis Borges made a pilgrimage to go see Jünger, and other people too. Yeah. So yeah, the whole. Yeah. We, it's funny. We did that. Honestly, we did that Art of Darkness episode before we put him on the list to cover. I didn't know anything about him at the time. It was like I keep seeing this Jünger name floating around the internet, and I knew like 3 bullet points about him. I was like, yeah, let's do one on that. That'll be cool. It's hard to get this real deep biographical information, and then you go into it, and the body of work is incredibly diverse and brilliant, and politically and historically and aesthetically kind of all over the place, and yet all sort of a piece. And his life and his perspective is just as interesting. So,
yeah. And of the books of his that I've read, Eumeswil might be my favorite. It's probably the most Jünger novel that he's written, in that all his novels tend to have this real glassiness, this strange feeling of stillness, even when in Storm of Steel he's being shelled at the Somme.
Right.
There's still this odd feeling of stasis throughout it. Characters in his books there's almost an Orwellian aspect to how he characterizes people, in that the characters tend to just be stand-ins for some particular concept or some particular point that Jünger wants to make. They don't tend to be particularly fleshed out people. Right. You'll just have, it's like in Eumeswil, you'll have Vigo, the historian. Vigo as a person is not particularly interesting, but he's there to allow Jünger to talk about history.
Yeah, but that seems true of pretty much all of Jünger's characters. Yeah.
But he's got all of these tendencies that he's had in his novelistic career that are just turned up to 10 in Eumeswil. Just everything. There's not much of a plot to speak of. We can talk about the context of the book. I'm not worried about spoiling things because nothing really happens to spoil. B, the one thing that I guess you could consider an event at the end of the book is, if you've read anything by Jünger previously, you kind of know that the main character is going to disappear into the forest. It's you're just waiting for that to happen.
Right.
So this is a book that if you like Jünger, you're going to love it. If you didn't like his more approachable works, like On the Marble Cliffs, you will absolutely hate this book. It's just longer and more Jünger.
Yeah, that's a good point. If On the Marble Cliffs felt to you like you came away with it, or like, there's really not a story there, or the characters didn't really do much for me, or whatever, then yeah, you probably wouldn't like Eumeswil. But it is interesting to see. I mean, there's at least 30 years between the writing of On the Marble Cliffs and Eumeswil, and this isn't to say that those books are dramatically similar. They're more similar to each other than they are to other books, simply because Jünger is such a singular kind of writer. But within the sort of Jüngerverse, I feel like they're actually quite a bit different, and you can sort of sense that he's an older man in the 70s when he's writing Eumeswil, because there's a certain level of resignation that he has.
Not even a certain level of resignation. He's so checked out in this book.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting. Anybody who feels hasn't really read much about. If you haven't really read much about Jünger, but you've sort of seen his name pop up, it gets really easy to get him confused, or you get a kind of caricature of him. You know, he's a German soldier, and so like he might as well be a Nazi, I guess. And that's just a real. It's a shame to me, because I think that prevents people from digging into a book like On the Marble Cliffs, which was written essentially as like Samizdat protest against the Nazis, and the fact that he never joined the party, and it kind of obscures the complexities of German history, but it definitely kind of gatekeeps people who I think could get a lot out of his work from ever bothering to take a look. And then you realize, like, later in his life, I'm sure we'll talk about this concept of the anarch, but he's checked out of politics entirely. Like he thinks in a certain sense it's all, I don't know if he would say it's silly or foolish, but like he is not. I don't think he was earnestly voting in the 80s and 90s.
No.
I don't think he was participating in the political game at all, really, except to sort of dismiss it and denigrate it.
Yeah, well, even before then, because I think the Forest Passage was published sometime in the 50s, mid 50s,
right?
And even in that, he was checked out of temporal politics, and I say that advisedly because he, at least from he was also present in On the Marble Cliffs. He was German, so he just innately believes in an unchanging world of being that is reflected out as a as a changeable world of becoming, and he was less and less interested in the world of becoming as opposed to the world of being. Beyond being able to be a chameleon in the temporal world, but we'll get into all of that. But yeah, he was pretty disillusioned pretty early on. I guess if you live through and outlive the German Empire, the Weimar Republic, Nazi Germany, you see East Germany on your doorstep, be born and then die, you probably would be pretty checked out as well.
Yeah. Well, and also the opinions that he had about modernism and modernity also sort of pushes him to the margins. I mean, it's difficult even for me to put myself in the mindset of a guy like Jünger, and I say even for me, just because I read a lot of him and a lot of his biographical information, so I feel like I'm far from an expert or anything like that, but I feel like I got a foothold on who he was. I mean, you think about, the thing that he said about World War II afterwards was effectively the long-term consequence of World War II is, in his mind, that all of Europe lost World War II to America.
Yep.
So it isn't just that Germany lost. It's literally that once it was over, basically all of European culture was getting ground into a finer and finer powder, and spread more and sort of disseminated and dissipated. And so I think that is probably very disillusioning for him. You imagine he fought in World War I, war hero, almost died a number of times, all that stuff that he went through for that. Then to see Germany corrupted in World War II to the extent that it was, and then afterwards just to be like, all right, so now I guess America runs, sort of Western culture. What's left for a guy like Jünger but to move out into the woods and stop paying attention to it.
Which he sort of did. And you can, I'm sure he felt disgust at the fact that so many large European cities more or less became Disneyland for Americans.
Yeah. I think he hated that. Yeah.
But we're lucky enough that a man like this not only sometimes wrote down his feelings about this, but was prolific. He just pumped out books. And like I said earlier, so Eumeswil was published in 1977 in German. I'm not sure when the English translation came out, but
that's a good question.
Him towards the end of his life, and I say towards because he still had a decade. No, two decades to live.
2 decades.
After this, despite having been shot, I don't know how many times in the First World War.
I think he had like 7. I think he was shot or shrapnel 7 different times, I want to say. Yeah.
And some of them were pretty gnarly, at least if Storm of Steel is anything to go by. Like, his lungs filling up with blood and him not drowning because someone picked him up and all of the blood drained out of the bullet holes from his lungs. I think the medic carrying him got shot in the head and Jünger fell over again and someone else picked him up and then that person also got killed underneath him. It's hard to overstate how wild his life was, which is, I think, really important context for the messages in Eumeswil. Because it would be very easy to read it and say he's a coward, or why doesn't he stand up for? I don't stand up for something good, but his life is really, really important in contextualizing that, because I think he just saw so much and fought for so much and was personally brave for so much for nothing that he eventually just threw up his hands and said, yeah, it's not worth it. Nothing you do will change anything.
Yeah, nothing I do. Yeah, nothing. Participating in this whole thing is kind of a farce. And then he's hyper intelligent, obviously too. So it's like I think he probably saw through any politician that was going to come along. He's not going to buy into. He's not going to buy into a stump speech. It's just not going to happen. He has a curious. I don't know if you've read much about his like ideas about the times of the Titans and the times of the gods or any of that, right? I mean, so in a certain sense, and this is kind of why the stuff he writes has this. It's almost its own. I mean, so you have these like subgenres or tropes that are kind of related to each other, right? Like dystopia and utopia, I think everybody can see are sort of related to each other. But then you have like post-apocalyptic sort of stuff, and then you have like varying degrees of distance from the apocalypse. Like if you read a book like Ridley Walker, like that's a few hundred years after, and then you have stuff that's like closer to the quote-unquote apocalypse. Eumeswil is happening. You could say maybe the year 3000. I don't know when it doesn't say obviously, but it's happening after some kind of catastrophic thing. And I think, and all of Jung's books take place in this sort of like no time sort of thing.
Yeah, he was very influenced by Spengler. Like you can just feel Spengler behind everything.
Yeah. Well, this is good because I haven't read. I know like the very much. I've listened to you on Spengler. That's what I know about Spengler. So I'm curious to hear more about that.
When this episode comes out, we're doing a series on the second volume of The Decline of the West, which is particularly important for Eumeswil. So hopefully listeners will be a bit up to speed on that.
Cool. Yeah. No, that sounds great. But like Jünger had this notion that like the modern era was the time of the Titans. That God was sort of dead in Nietzsche's parlance, and that it was the time of the Titans. And the Titans are like you could find similar concepts in all kinds of different religions, like the demiurge or the there are these sort of like entities or forces that are associated with technology and expedience and like machinations and his opinion, I think that's part of his reason for backing off. It's like that's what's in charge is this like vaguely kind of like demonic like I think now the term we'd be thinking in Landian terms of like techno capital or something. It's sort of a similar concept. So I think he thought like that's what's running the world. There's kind of no point participating. It's not like you're going to beat it or outsmart it or anything like that.
Yeah, his views on technology are fascinating. Also, when you consider his contemporaries, because I'm pretty sure he personally knew Martin Heidegger, who wrote extensively about technology. Yeah. He definitely knew Carl Schmitt personally, who would talk about technology. That's more in the background of his writings, but if you know that he was worried about it, it's very much there.
Yeah.
And then also again just Junger's life. I mean, he started fighting war on horses and also saw Blitzkrieg. So and then nuclear weapons afterwards. So
Right. Yeah.
He was was extremely sensitive to technological change.
Yeah. Well, and he saw how technology took all of the romance and adventure out of warfare. And you could say, well, there never was any, and maybe I would agree with that. But like to Jünger, there was, and he saw technology take all of that away. And this talks about this quite a bit in the Glass Bees, and you can kind of feel echoes of it in Eumeswil. And so it's like, of course that it's just doing that to everything, basically.
Yeah,
he just saw it happen right in front of his eyes.
Yeah. He has a work, I forget when it's published actually. I want to say it was one of his earlier works, but don't hold me to that, called Total Mobilization, where he does talk about the effect of technology on war in that he said so previously in wars with a certain level of technology, the sort of the warrior was the most important. So someone's personal courage and skill squaring, I don't know, two people fighting with swords. Right. But he said that as technology became more powerful, when you had groups of people opposing each other, it was more two technological entities opposing each other, and which was more able to mobilize the resources of a part of land, including the human resources, would win. And so he talked about when you have people who have just an extremely low level of warfighting technology facing off against machine guns, it's no longer about, say, two human warriors competing in terms of skill. There's just this kind of it's an ontological difference between them. It's people versus accumulated capital resources, basically. It's overwhelming.
Right. And yeah, it's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
I think Jünger would rather just fight it out with bayonets. Mm-hmm. If we're gonna do this, let's see who can handle. Let's put two people against each other, or two groups of people against each other, and just the better man wins. And it's not that at all. And so I think he understood. He came to understand that same phenomena was just happening across all levels of society, across the working life, everything. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think there's truth to that. I mean, I don't really see how you can argue against that. You can argue that the technological change brings good stuff too, but I don't think you can argue that it doesn't oftentimes have a dehumanizing effect.
Yeah. And that's the glass bees that you brought up is a real, it's a more directed exploration of that specifically than Eumeswil, although it's very much there in Eumeswil. Which is, the general conceit of Eumeswil is a city in, I'm assuming it's in Morocco, or what is now Morocco, because he talks about Morocco, the river Sus, which is a river in Morocco. But if not Morocco, then let's just say North Africa somewhere. So there's this city of Eumeswil, named after Eumenes, one of the generals fighting in the Diadochian Wars, which, because it's Jünger, is itself highly symbolic. Sort of the empire of Alexander the Great just crumbling upon his death, and the sort of the inner unity provided by Alexander being taken away and leading to a reversion of humanity to this state of existential violence, which for Jünger, there just seems to be a background of eternal violence in human affairs, from which sometime, and it's this historyless, interminable violence, from which every now and then, and this is really where the Spengler comes in, you get this alignment and inner unity, and he calls it, they discover the gods. The gods is almost these things to orient towards, things that are not just violence and force. And when that happens, you get this brief flowering of culture and ways for people to interact with each other apart from force. But those gods are always mortal, and they always die, and you always return to Titanism. Yeah. And so Eumeswil, the city, lives in one of those times, or just the state of humanity most of the time in most places, of a post-historical, he calls it a Fellaheen society, which is where you really feel that he's been reading Jünger, because it's just the language that Jünger uses, that Spengler uses, particularly in the
interesting.
Second.
You know who else uses the word Fellaheen a lot? Jack Kerouac. I don't know what that means, but I'm imagining some bizarre correspondence between these three guys that I can't quite articulate.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if Jack Kerouac had also read The Decline of the West.
I bet he did, yeah.
He seemed like an odd enough guy and sort of hard enough to pin down that it wouldn't surprise me if he were actually really into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so that's the city of Eumeswil, and because Eumeswil has no gods, it has only titans. It's just constantly passing between the hands of various groups of rulers, and none of them command any sort of meaningful respect. Some of them, you'd say they're LARPing now. You have the tribunes who were the previous group who larped as liberal Democrats, and Jünger, I know Jünger personally really disliked liberalism, and I think he said he hated democracy like the plague during the Weimar years.
Yeah.
So he doesn't like it. He makes all of the people who really support the tribunes look completely ridiculous, including the main character's brother and his janitor, because he doesn't refer to him as a father.
Right. Right. But
then
he thinks, it's funny, those guys, like, he does sort of like disparage his father and his brother, but like you can kind of transplant them to, like, it's like his brother and his father watch cable news. That's the level of, like, you know what I mean? It's just like, I can't get along with them. I don't like the conversations I have with them are stupid, and they always go to like the lowest common denominator of understanding the situation. That's kind of how I felt about it. It was like almost like they weren't even. He disrespected him because they didn't even think clearly enough to have earned their opinions. It was like, yeah. So anyway,
yeah, and then you've got the Condor, who is the current ruler of Eumeswil in the novel, and he's just a tyrant. And to whom Jünger and the main character Martin or Manuel Venator is much more sympathetic, because he's like, look, you know where the power is. I think he said one of the Condor's greatest qualities is he has no ideas and has no pretensions to ideas. It's like he just makes sure the streets are safe and people have food. Right. And that money works, and other than that, it's like, well, I don't care.
Yeah. And you don't get the sense, and this is not like an argument for tyranny or whatever, but in this case, the Condor, you don't get the sense that he's doing a lot of, like, this isn't like a 1984 situation where we're
he's not malicious.
We're articulating what's wrong with this government. It's just like, there's a tyrant there, and Venator like knows him personally, and he does seem like on a personal level he's might be an okay guy even. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, you just feel. Obviously I didn't know Jünger personally, but it just feels like Venator is basically Ernst Jünger.
Yeah,
in
I think so.
Eumeswil.
I don't think there's much daylight between the two at all.
And he does have like offhand criticisms of tyrants in general. And when I say tyrant, it's sort of a military ruler who's not part of a hereditary aristocracy. Like the Condor was, I think he was a naval officer who bombarded Eumeswil, and then took power from the tribunes.
Yeah. So you assume that's basically like a coup, right?
Yeah.
So he was sort of the leader of a coup, fundamentally.
Yeah, leader of a coup. And throughout the book, Martin, and we'll get into the anarch as an archetype, is just straight up says, yeah, I know he's going to lose power violently. Like it's going to happen. Right. And I'm, maybe I'll fight for him, maybe I won't. Depends on how I feel.
Right.
Yeah, and then on the background of this, Martin works as a historian and a teacher, and then at night he works at the night bar, at the Casbah for the Condor and the people around him, and as a historian observes them, and that's the main reason why he works for them, so he can observe them as a historian. Right. And then basically the entire book, which is 400 pages or so, is just him offering his thoughts on how humans organize themselves, there's a lot on what history means, a lot on how does an individual live in a Plutonian world, a world of titanic forces where you have no real power on external events, but you can have power over internal events. And then, because it's Jünger, it ends with his disappearance into the great forests to the south,
Right.
of Eumeswil, which is just barely even symbolic because he has a book called The Forest Passage. Like he's
the copy that I have, the digital copy that I have, is literally The Forest Passage and Eumeswil in the same.
Yeah,
in
the two really go together. Even though something like 20 years separates their publications, they really do need to be read together. I think probably Forest Passage first, and then then the significance of, especially the final chapter of Eumeswil.
Right.
Is
it sets you up
clear.
to. It sets you up to have a much richer, to go into it with a much richer association of meanings about the forest, ultimately. I think it's kind of obvious what it means, but when Jünger has put all this baggage on that term and that concept of the forest, that actually going into Eumeswil with that in hand, I think makes it make even more sense.
Yeah. I think also if people are wanting to read it, it's a lot of homework to do, but The Decline of the West by Spengler really deepens a lot of it, especially the second volume, because he was obviously reading that a lot for this, because so many of his preoccupations with cyclical history, with historyless epigonic city-states, even with handwriting, with the degradation of language, with various approaches to history. So Jünger doesn't really like, I suppose you call it modern historiography, of looking at what he would call piecemeal facts rather than taking in something as a whole, which was a particular preoccupation of Spengler's as well. Just so many of these things are very, very strongly in Spengler. And to an extent, so there's a very important character, one of Venator's three spiritual fathers, Vigo, the historian, basically just feels like Spengler. Like it just feels like a Spengler stand-in. Yeah. In many ways, I think he is just the Spengler stand-in.
Do you think he took the name from Vigo?
I'm not sure. I expect people's names are also very symbolic, because everything in this book is very, very symbolic.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to think about how. So Spengler, I know roughly, but like, when did Decline of the West come out?
First volume was 1918. Second volume was sometime in the 1920s. I can't remember when exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But I was just trying to get a generational sense. So he would have been.
Jünger was definitely around for them.
Right. Yeah, he's around for everything. I mean,
he just knew everyone in Europe in the 20th century. And The Decline of the West was actually very popular when it was published. It wasn't sort of a sleeper hit. It was in the Weimar years. It was talked about a lot.
Yeah.
So he would definitely have been exposed to it. Yeah. And I guess that's also if a group of people to whom I'd recommend this book. If you like Decline of the West, Eumeswil is basically a dramatization of a post-civilizational Fellaheen society and a man trying to work out how to live in it.
Yeah. There's definitely, I am not, like I said, I'm not super deep on Spengler, so this is interesting to see, to come to understand how much sort of overlap there is. And definitely, I mean, this book, as the other novels by Jünger I've read, they are, I mean, we would call them sort of theory fiction if they came out now. Yeah. They're deliberate circumstances so you can play out sort of philosophical ideas and sort of put them in practice and think about them from different angles and that sort of thing, which, you know, that's not to say it isn't kind of thrilling as you read it in a way, just because I think the sort of the what is in place of suspense is sort of like, okay, where is he going to take these ideas? Though, of course, there is sort of the ticking clock of the condor is going to get thrown out at some point. And I think in the back of your mind, you are sort of like reading to see when that happens and how it plays out. And in what way does Venator sort of survive or not survive. And it doesn't quite play out doesn't quite play out how. I mean, you're right. Once you get to the end, you do sort of expect it. But I did think we were going to get like a scene of the Cosba getting blown up or something. I was kind of expecting that, to be honest. But it never quite happens.
Yeah, because there are so many different directions to go in, and so many of them, I think, are discussions of the various characters who are stand-ins for his various ideas. But it is interesting that the Condor has two people, one sitting to his left, one sitting to his right, because again, it's Jünger and just everything needs to be a symbol. Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess if you've read the Forest Passage, that's perfectly consonant with just everything Jünger said after maybe 1930. But on his right, he has his major domo, or just domo, who's really a late, like a Spenglerian, late civilizational or post-civilizational man of the material world. He's just interested in utility and things functioning. And he's extremely competent at that. And then on his left sits Attila, who is he's an old guy with a long white beard, and I don't think you have any other description of him because Jünger just doesn't really bother with with those sorts of things very much. It feels like you're viewing his characters through a little peephole most of the time.
Yes.
And he is he's traveled all over the place, including to the Arctic. He understands the world mythologically, and he seems to have some deep connection to the forest. So he's been to the forests south of Eumeswil and survived, and some sort of connection to the eternal world of being. And interestingly, at the end of the book, the Condor basically goes with the left-hand path. He goes with Attila, and they organise an expedition into the forest with Martin, and they just disappear there.
They just disappear. They never come back. Yeah, and I think for people who haven't listened to it, just when we talk about the forest, like enough time has passed since like right now and this book, the world of this book, that the world has become uncharted. It's grown to have uncharted areas to it. So there's the forest that nobody really is kind of shrouded in myth and rumor. And the Arctic, similarly, it's like nobody really knows kind of what's going on in any of these places. And at first, when I was reading, I just kind of assumed that these were just rumors talking about like the strange animals that were down there and whatnot. Yeah. But I do kind of think that within the confines of the book, I think Attila was sort of telling the truth more or less about his adventures. I mean, but that's one thing that's kind of interesting too, is sort of like going into the forest. It's anything could be down there. It is this sort of zone of dangerous potentiality. There could be, some kind of gorilla elephant down there. Like we have no idea. We actually don't know what's down there. Jünger has allowed that to be the case. Yeah. Yeah,
it's interesting. It is set in a world where I think it's hinted that there was some sort of cataclysmic nuclear war. He calls it the global civil war.
Right.
Yeah, and that's played out. It's not said how long in the past, but yeah, long enough. And Attila talks about when he visited the forest, all of the plants and animals just like melding into each other, which I guess again is it's Jünger symbolism of there's no longer this scientific categorization and separating things out based on their physical characteristics. It's more the world understood as myth. And the collapse of those sort of boundaries of, say, Linnaeus's classification system or any sort of schema that you could place upon the world is melting away again.
Yeah, and this is really significant for Jünger. So in his life, he cataloged as particularly insects. He was very interested in like collecting all of the insects that he could and categorizing them and putting them on pins and naming them. And he also did sort of bird watching, which is like, okay, that's this distinct bird, and I've identified it, and I write it down in my notebook. And on one level, he was interested in the sort of scientific pursuit of that, but he also had he's also a very mystical. He was a very mystical guy, and so part of my understanding of that he's written about this, and he'd written about this in some places, that part of his whole categorization thing was he thought it got him closer to understanding the mind of God by doing this categorization. So for him, the categories to get confused and muddled up with each other is sort of indicative of like God's not in charge anymore. We're beyond that, And so it's not just like, oh, I'm going to make some spooky monsters and that's kind of cool. It's Jünger trying to say something fairly deep about where the world could be heading, and a mythological, but also just a very real. This is what happens when God leaves us. Sort of. This is where it goes. Yeah. Yeah.
This defined world that you thought you could understand has just escaped you and has just flown out of your grasp.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's interesting contrasting the forest with the catacombs, because he keeps referencing the catacombs, and I think the catacombs are an actual place. Like they're these bunkers built underground and under mountains that are full of pre-war technology, which to the people of Eumeswil just seems magical. And one of
they don't even know it's
other
down
spiritual
there.
fathers, Bruno, is obsessed with the catacombs, and he says that while Vigo is oriented towards the forest, Bruno is and the gods, Bruno is oriented towards the catacombs and the underworld and titans. And I guess this is Junger's mysticism. Despite that, he sees Vigo and Bruno as ultimately orienting towards the same thing, like trying to move behind the world of appearances to get at something deeper. They're just doing it in opposite directions that end up in the same place.
Right. As opposed to like, is it Kressmuller?
Yeah, Kessmuller.
Yeah, who he sort of dismisses out of hand in a way, right?
What do you think Kessmuller is a really rude stand-in for Adorno, or am I just...
Oh, you would know that better than I. That could very well be. Yeah, no, that you would. That could very well be. Yeah, I mean, because at one point, Kessmuller is like Kessmuller, if I'm remembering right, the sort of historical documents he produces or whatever are sort of like cheats. He's sort of using the Luminaire and what is implied to be a kind of cheap, easy way. It seems like. So.
Yeah, of just using historical facts and theory to self-promote in a very, very cheap way, and a way that Jünger just didn't seem to respect at all.
Right. Whereas the forest and the catacombs were like, those approaches are like two respectable, but approach. Like those are two different. That's a choice you can make between the two that are, honorable, respectable, understandable. But yeah, Kressmuller's just.
And with the forest and the catacombs too, it's that they're not necessarily good or bad. Because at least hearing about Junger's life, I think it'd be easy to think, oh, well, forest equals good, catacombs equals bad. But in this book, he makes pretty clear that both are extremely dangerous. Like the forest is not a hospitable place. It's almost an overabundance of life that will engulf you, and the catacombs are completely dead and petrified and carry their own dangers. Dead and petrified, but if the technology finds its way into human hands, can reawaken and reorganize human affairs according to its own logic as well. Right. So they're both very dangerous.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting. I mean, this kind of ties into where we sort of started talking about violence to a certain extent. I think, and this is why it's, again, another reason why it's interesting that Jünger wrote this book, because I think danger and violence, they kind of have a different meaning for a guy like Jünger. I mean,
they didn't really bother him much.
Right, he wrote a book called War as Inner Experience, and then I think I have
On Pain as well.
On Pain, right? So he's a guy who I think understands that any kind of actual worthwhile transformation or evolution is going to require like literal, metaphorical or literal bloodshed. Like that's how it works. It's like that's how things actually happen. So for him, I guess it would be just as like, you know, you don't get an option for it to not be dangerous. I guess you're kind of picking your poison to a certain extent.
Yeah, it is interesting that even though he's so checked out of any sort of politics in this book, he seems like the kind of guy who was always willing to pick up a gun.
Right. Right.
He was always very ambivalent about violence, and truly ambivalent, like not anti-violence at all, despite having seen and participated in so much violence in his life. It's part of what makes him such a fascinating figure. It's just these books they're just not really like anything being written at the moment.
No, they're definitely not. And yeah, the sort of it is interesting because he doesn't have like a penchant for violence, and his writing isn't violent. I mean, other than Storm and Steel, but that was reportage on of violent, you know, on this Battle of the Somme and these kinds of things. And but I definitely think like, yeah, I think if you would have like, you know, if you would have knocked politely on his door, he probably would have welcomed you in for tea and invited you to look at his insect collection. But if you were stalking around his yard at night, he would have filled you full of bullets.
Yeah, he was probably a pretty scary guy.
I think, like, I do imagine that there's like a turn he could make where you're like, oh no, I don't want to deal with this guy. This is, even though he's, you know, physically, I don't think he was super imposing or anything like that, but definitely a, you know, a badass in his own right. But he did talk in other places in his writing. I mean, this is where I think his politics just got, in a way, sort of got narrower and narrower and narrower until, like, to him, the seat of power is like the individual, and sort of the you know, the fundamental political act is to like shoot somebody who's trying to take your freedom away from you. In a way.
Yeah, let's talk about the anarch, because that's
okay. Yeah.
Oh, that dovetails nicely into the anarch, and that's one of the biggest, I guess, in terms of Junger's thought. Eumeswil, that might be one of the biggest innovations of Eumeswil, is introducing the anarch, because I think this is the first time the anarch appeared in his writing.
Yeah, I think he refers to it as the forest rebel in the forest passage, I believe. I don't know.
I think it's slightly different, because he talks about the forest fleer or forest rebel. It depends on how it's translated from German.
Right.
In Eumeswil, and says that so the difference between the forest rebel and the anarch is that the forest rebel has been cast out of society, like they've fled society, whereas the anarch still lives there. But they're quite similar. And
it's, I guess the anarch could become the forest rebel given particular circumstances, right? Yeah.
And he does.
I'm actually doing a search.
He does at the end of this book.
He does. Yeah, that's right.
But the anarch's this interesting figure, because for context, how Jünger either interacted with the world, or at least how he wrote about it, tends to be through these archetypal figures. He's got all of these figures like the worker was an early one of his figures, the unknown soldier, the forest rebel, the anarch. And he'll use these archetypal figures to try to explain certain eventualities in the world, which is it's an interesting way to do it, and it's a way that's, I guess, pedagogically really effective, because it really sticks in your mind, you know, what the unknown soldier or what the worker does.
Yeah.
But the anarch's an interesting figure. So in this book, Martin Venator or Manuel Venator, and that name change in the for the purposes of the anarch is really, really important, is an anarch, and he spends a lot of this book talking about what an anarch is, and showing situations in which Venator behaves in an anarch or an anarchic manner. And the anarch is he's really interesting in that he'll compare the anarch to an anarchist. And he says an anarchist is basically someone who looks at authority, whether it's law or a monarch or a tyrant, and defines themselves in opposition to it. And he says, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something like, in any act of resistance or any act of opposition is cooperation or is collusion. Because in opposing yourself to some sort of power or a power structure, you're validating that structure, you're acknowledging it and recognizing it. And he says that the anarchist, I think he also says, like, the anarchist is like someone who will drive on the wrong side of the road and then expect you to congratulate them for it after they have an accident.
Right.
And he says he has a lot of contempt for anarchists. He says they're just asking for trouble and they get squashed and achieve nothing. Sure, maybe they even succeed in killing a tyrant, but all that leads to is another person filling their place who is also going to be illegitimate and will try to restrict people's freedom.
Yeah, whereas he does also make the point that, like, all revolutions always achieve the exact opposite of what they're aiming at anyway. So, like, then what's the point of having a revolution? To Jünger, they never work. They actually do. They do the opposite of work.
Yeah. They're just not. For him, inner freedom particularly was the most important thing, and particularly with respect to inner freedom. Not only don't they don't achieve inner freedom, or they'll affect changes in the world that the people who participate in the revolution often don't want. But then also importantly, they don't even affect inner freedom. Like, they're just categorically different activities.
Right.
And then you have
part of it is just a preoccupation with being in opposition. It's just like always thinking about yourself in opposition to this thing as almost like using up mental real estate.
Yeah. And then you've got the anarch, who is just internally disconnected. But importantly, they're a chameleon, and he uses that metaphor of the chameleon repeatedly, that they blend in and they participate in the world as a game. And he says when you participate in the world as a game, you learn to enjoy the finesse with which you can play in politics. And so Martin has, like, he's working for the Condor in the Casbah, which sits outside of the city of Eumeswil and is sort of the Condor's stronghold. And his dad and brother just don't understand why he'd possibly work for the Condor, whereas Martin says it's just so he can observe the workings of power and act as a chameleon, because internally he's not dedicated to any sort of cause. He says if there were to be a coup attempt against the Condor, Martin would probably fight to defend the Condor, but it would be to defend the Condor as a person, because he believes in people, but not in ideas. That's right. That's not important to him.
And also because, I mean, he does have some concern that if something was to go down, that he's associated with the Condor by working with him, even though he's not, like, ideologically or whatever on board with him. So there could be that too, right? It's like, well, if you defend the Condor, you're kind of saving your own butt to a certain extent. But he's sort of fine with, he would also be fine not doing it. There's no motivated, he's not politically motivated at all. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he also says that the relationship of an anarch to the law is also illustrative, because he says an anarchist sees the law and wants to tear it down, and a criminal will see the law and wants to break it, whereas an anarch sees the law and regards it as sort of the same way that you would regard natural phenomena. Like, you don't want to oppose or contravene the rain when it starts raining. You just accommodate rain.
Right.
In the same way,
you put a rain jacket on.
Yeah, exactly. And in the same way, the anarch sees a new ruler come in and sees their new laws, and in the same way that you would accommodate yourself to the weather, just accommodates themselves to that. And it's where the forest passage part comes in, because so much of that and so much of being the forest rebel is about cultivating an inner relationship to this atemporal world, and both drawing yourself into it by coming up with signs, particularly artistic signs pointing the way, but also leaving behind those signs for others. And that process is still taking place for the anarch. Because it's interesting, maybe the only place where someone might be able to say Venator was politically organising was that he tries to, I think it's fairly early in the book he uses this term which I really like, he organises a group of spiritually homesick people around Vigo.
That's right, yeah.
And that's sort of his one act of political organisation. If you define political very, very broadly. So it's everything else in the book is just for Venator. It's just him organising for himself. Like he makes a bunker on the Sus River that he can disappear to, and it's stocked with food and water and guns and so on, and he can disappear there if he needs to. Right. And that's just for him. He tells no one else about it.
Yeah, he's very careful not to make sure that nobody else knows it's there, and yeah.
And everything else he does is basically just for him, except for this small group of people, of students that he organises around Vigo. Yeah, for the spiritually homesick.
I mean, what do you think his motivation is? His motivation there just sort of like civic-minded benevolence, or I'm not.
At least because it's for those who haven't read Jünger, he tends to be very mysterious in everything he says. But at least piecing together from what I've read of him, I really do think he saw the highest role that a human being could play. In the Forest Passage, I think he calls these people the aristocrats of the spirit, or spiritual aristocrats. Mm-hmm. People who can find some sort of link or in some way directly experience the world of being and then leave behind almost signposts pointing there for others. And maybe if he's not just acting for himself, so just for his own gratification because he likes spending time with interesting people, it might be for that. To try to offer a way out or some sort of solace for those few people who can step outside of sort of the historyless world.
Well, and that's what Jünger, I think, probably sees himself as doing with this, with a novel like Eumeswil, right? And certainly with a book like The Forest Passage as a signpost, kind of like pointing you in a certain direction, like, you can go this way and get out of this stuff, maybe. Yeah.
It's the thing with this book is, because I've read it a bunch of times, and each time I read it, it feels more distant, more inscrutable. It really is the sort of book where as soon as you think you have a firm hold of it, it just slips out of your fingers.
Yeah. No, my reading experience definitely was. There's a lot in here on the second reading that I had. It wasn't even like I'd quite forgotten it. It's like I'd read it and those parts had sort of just like sunk into my general subconscious, and I hadn't even thought of them as being from Eumeswil, just because it's not. I don't know. It's not strung together. You can take any piece of it out, and the whole thing kind of still fundamentally works. And so it's really interesting that way. I feel like you could probably, if you know the premise, you could probably just pick up at any chapter and just start there in a way.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because how the book is structured is, so there are chapters, but the chapters don't mean that much. Like a chapter will be
kind of arbitrary.
Yeah, it'll be like my day in the city of Eumeswil, and it'll be what that means in practice is he'll have a sentence of like, I wake up in my apartment in Eumeswil, and then he'll start talking about his theory of history, and then after a few pages he'll be like, oh, that's right, I haven't even gotten out of bed. I get out of bed and look at myself in the mirror. It's right. Primal image is image and mirror image, and then it'll start talking about that, and then a few pages later it'll be like, oh, now I leave my apartment.
Right.
The book is just structured as like, you'll have a paragraph which will be him just offering some sort of perfunctory context setting. It's, this is where I am and what I'm doing, and then he'll throw some sort of thought at you, and then you'll just have a new paragraph, and it just repeats. Yeah, you're right. It's segmented like a almost like some of those worms where you can just like pull a segment out and it'll just grow a new worm.
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of love that about it in a way, you know. I mean, I love a good pot boiler page turner too, but there is something appealing about this thing that you kind of can drift in and out of to a certain extent. I mean, I'm curious, like, what do you think of the anarch as a strategy? Because my like bullet point on anarch is like it's a conceptual strategy for surviving modernity. I mean, what do you think of it as a strategy? Is it feasible? Is it a cop out? Like, what's your?
I was wanting to ask you something very similar because it is so at variance with at least how. With the popular understanding of what it means to be a good person or a brave person. And you could say, well, you know, that understanding is cultivated by a state that wants people to fight for it. So, of course, the state will say, well, you're a good person if you'll, when you are called by your masters, shoot other people who are called by their masters to oppose us.
Right.
I really don't know. So this book is great in that it really challenges you, and I don't say challenges you in a sort of a trite way or the way it's often used. Like it really will offer you some questions of, you know, are you a coward if you don't physically defend some sort of community that you haven't necessarily chosen, but one that you know, one into which you are interpolated in the sense of Louis Althusser. One that addresses you, and in addressing you, arrogates to itself your physical well-being and your loyalty. Yeah, I really don't know. It's also in terms of how effective is it. I you know, without wanting to say too much, I've been in sort of spiritual crisis for a few years, feeling the death of God very, very intensely, and so if you believe in this, if not other world, but a world upon which our world of appearances is fundamentally contingent, then yeah, absolutely, this is a really viable strategy because our physical world is just not very important compared to the eternal. If you don't believe in that, that's you know, checking out totally of politics is a terrible idea.
Yeah, because like, what are you running? What are you disappearing or like running?
Yeah, what are you running to?
Yeah, it has only the sort of negative connotation running away from. There's no running to aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say there's a very facile way in which someone could use the figure of the anarch to justify absolute passivity to themselves. To say that, well, I'm not going to do anything to change my lot because I'm an anarch. Whereas, were you to take the figure of an anarch seriously, it demands a huge amount of you. Because he says the forest rebel is one whom society has cast out, and the anarch is one who has cast society from themselves. And that means a lot. I mean, it's sort of I forget what, you know, the precise wording of what Aristotle said, but you know, it's the person who is not who is outside of society is either a monster or a monster or a god. Like, I'm butchering the quote, but it's either you're either just an absolute animal, or you're just so far beyond everyone else that you are a society unto yourself.
Right. And who has the capability or the courage or to actually do that, right? Right.
And to truly do it without. It's one thing to say, I don't care what people think about me, and just anyone who says that, almost anyone who says that is just completely lying, because so much of what the anarch does is they truly don't care what other people think of them beyond being able to fit in a chameleonic manner.
Right.
Which, again, like, for someone to actually do, enact that in practice is so profoundly difficult, and just so counter to how humans as intensely social creatures function.
Yeah, and to the people around them, and I guess they don't care, but to some of the people around them, it's going to appear as sociopathic or
or maybe
antisocial.
Just is.
Yeah, maybe just is. Yeah, maybe it's functionally sociopathic, even if you don't have that particular thing going on in your brain. Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that for sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've provided no concrete answer to that question, but it's just okay. It's so difficult. What do you
being
think
a
of
chameleon.
It?
No, just kidding. It holds a lot of appeal to me, but I do think it has some of these flaws that we've talked about. I mean, I think there is. I'll say one thing. Like, I do think that like there is a degree of participating in. I mean, I certainly I'm participating in culture, right? I have a podcast and I write, and like all that stuff's really important to me. And I have a family and a network of people, and all those people are sort of my own society, and all those people are really important to me. And I'm in a certain sense have like a religious devotion to them, and so I can't say that I don't care what anybody thinks, right? I can't say that I'm only sort of like fitting in so that I don't have, to an extent that I can sort of like maintain my interior freedom. So there's like aspects in which it seems sort of flawed and almost not realistic, and a little bit not, I'm not in like a situation where I feel like I can just like martyr my participation in society and just like give up on that. But on the other hand, like, I do feel that there are a lot of things that are not worth participating in. That they're sort of like, it's almost denigrating to you to participate in them. And I would think everybody's could fill in a different thing for that. And there is a sort of mimetic or narrative kind of game at play of influences and manipulation that politically and other stuff that we used to have names for other than politics. The way political has sort of swept everything up into it. There's a lot of that stuff that it is kind of silly in my opinion, to participate in to a degree, and so like for me, the anarch is like this extreme version of a kind of mental practice that it's, I think, valuable to attract, to kind of follow along to a certain degree. Like Junger's sort of, you can't say anarchic because that sounds like it's associated with anarchism, which is different than this.
But he himself, or at least in the translation I read, will say anarchic.
Okay. Versus anarchinistic, I guess. Yeah. So there are like, to me, there are things that I have sort of personally taken on from it a little bit, or at least like articulated stuff I already kind of had going on in my head. I mean, his criticisms of democracy, a lot of it is like right on, like, in a pure theoretical sense, I think democracy is kind of like the only thing that is sort of worth doing. But like in practice, it kind of ends up being like, in some ways, it ends up being sort of a magic lantern that is spun so that the average person feels like they're participating in a democracy so that they don't do anything else. And so for me, there are these games that I feel like I'm lying to myself if I participate in them, or I feel like I'm purposely ignoring things that I know and understand by participating in them. And so in that case, the anarch kind of does appeal to me. I'm also like building an off-grid cabin in the woods of northern Michigan. So like on an actual like personal level, like there is a certain level of like, that yes, escape society. So like in an actual practice thing, like I kind of have a bunker by the River Sus. It's not quite to that point yet, but one day it's going to be. And I do have like dreams about like no longer living in urban areas. I don't really want to participate in, and I have a lot, you know, but as time goes on, am getting like more and more interested in this sort of individualized interior freedom that the anarch kind of represents to me. But I do think I don't think anybody can actually live like that and not go insane. So it's sort of like a thing that I can take ideas of it, like a bowerbird, and like kind of build my personal set of ideas and add to it. But I can't go full bore. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the anarch is an ideal figure, which probably just can't exist perfectly in practice.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it's some sort of mental yardstick so that you can have some sort of sense of what is worth participating in and what isn't, rather than just being swept up in everything that's currently screaming for your attention.
Right. Well, and here's like the other thing that's sort of necessary, I think. Like let's say you're like, I'm gonna start like pushing the way I think about things more in this direction of the anarch. Like, you still need a positive. Okay, so you're gonna like cultivate interior freedom at all costs. That's cool. What are you doing with that freedom and that space? Like, is that just so you can just sit there? Like, I guess that's fine. But to me, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm kind of a doer. So, like, I do want that interior mental freedom. But, like, I have a lot of ideas about what I want to do with that time and mental energy. And I guess Jünger maybe is just sort of leaving that open. But, like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you could maybe look at his life, because he obviously saw some of himself in the anarch. And
for sure.
One of the most striking things about his life, particularly post-wars, was that he knew everyone that was interesting. And maybe that's where you get to that. So the one positive thing, and I say positive in the sense, not in a sort of a value judgment sense, but in the sense of taking an action in the world rather than stepping back from it, that Venator took, was forming that small group of the spiritually homesick.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he found most meaningful, was meeting and talking to other people who were doing something that he felt was meaningful in terms of what they were thinking or what they were producing, and drawing those people together. Maybe that was what he thought you should do, or what he would do.
Yeah, and Venator is very interested in history, and it doesn't seem like just for the purposes of. He seems sort of aesthetically and intellectually interested in history. It's fun and it's fun to him. It's not by itself. It's not by itself. He's not interested in history to some other means. It's like a genuine sort of pastime of his. He likes it. It's interesting. It helps him understand himself and the world. And so I guess in that case, that's what he's freeing up that interior mental space for. But then then he's spending awful lot of time at the Casbah night bar too. And I mean, he does say that his reasons are to observe, and I guess that's true. But yeah, I do wonder if there are sort of unstated reasons for that too, or is Jünger making a Jünger's got this sort of relationship in the public mind, at least outside of Germany, of, like I said, this caricature version of him is like, well, he's basically a Nazi, which just isn't true at all. But you do kind of wonder if this isn't him sort of retroactively thinking about his relationship to that power. I'm
sure there's at least some of that in there, because how could you... I mean, he lived through the rise of Nazism, and the Second World War, and then denazification. Like how couldn't you think about that at times?
Right. Right. And here's one thing that I do like really kind of respect about the anarch thing. So people who don't know, the British sort of occupying forces, they made a lot of people go through denazification, which was effectively like a re-education process. And at the end, there was some documentation that you had gone through this. And Jünger, they tried to make Jünger go through it. And he basically said, I'm not going to do that because I wasn't a Nazi. And this had steep impacts on his international publishing career. He basically wasn't allowed, effectively was blacklisted from international publication for years and years and years because of this. But that was a thing that I kind of respect about this anarch position, where it's just like, I'm not part of this. Just because I happen to be sitting here doesn't mean that I'm like, you can't necessarily associate me with everything that I was near. And I do think that I do think there is something in that is illustrative in a direction of like, how do you live through, especially like the forces that Jünger was dealing with of modernity are just cranked up to 11 now. And I think there is something in that of I'm just who I am. I'm not any other things just because they happen to be around me. I'm, in Jünger's case, I'm Jünger. I'm not going to go through denazification because I'm not a Nazi. So if I'm not going to play that game, it's ridiculous. That part of the anarch spirit, I think, is useful and valuable.
And has obviously been had been present in him for a long time, because he was courted extensively by the Nazi Party to sign up and become politically active, because he was so famous in Germany, and famous in a way that the Nazis found very attractive. Like he was just a very, very competent soldier.
Yeah, hyper masculine, but also a good writer and super smart, and you wanted him on your side. They tried to get him to head up some poetry council or so. There was a bunch of stuff they tried to get him to do, to be the sort of the face of, and he would just never do any of it.
And it's interesting comparing his trajectory with that of Carl Schmitt, the legal theorist, who would like really, really got in bed with the Nazis. And because they knew each other personally, and their correspondence still exists, and it's basically, it boils down to Jünger telling Schmitt, don't get in bed with them because this too will pass, and like it's just not a good idea tying yourself to a ship that will inevitably sink, whatever you think about it.
And that's what Venator is doing in Eumeswil, right? He's sort of there, but he's ready to kind of cut himself loose at any moment.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's where questions of, is being an anarch cowardly become really interesting, because I think when you've got someone like Jünger, I'd be inclined to say in his case, no, because he, like plenty of people suffered lethal consequences for not cooperating with Nazism.
Right.
Whereas, he actually lived it.
Yeah. Well, and he's a survivor. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think if somebody else were to sort of formulate this idea of the anarch, it would be easy to say, like, this is just kind of cope because you don't want to have to commit to anything, and you don't want to have to actually fight for anything. And Jünger gets another person saying it would be like I always, one of my pet peeves is when I hear somebody who's really wealthy say that money's not a big deal. And you're like, yeah, to you it's not. Yeah, it's because you've got millions of dollars. It probably doesn't feel like that big of a deal to you. But like, it's kind of a similar thing. It's like, but when Jünger says it, it's like, no, this is a guy who he picked up, he picked up guns and got shot at, shot people, and went through all of the things that you could in terms of like actually applying your physical body towards a political end. And the outcome of it is this idea that of sort of non-participation. It is. Yeah. I think you kind of have to think about too his. It's interesting to me to pair the ideas of Jünger with somebody who for most people probably seems radically different, but there's interesting overlaps with somebody like Timothy Leary, is tune in, turn on, and drop out. That's kind of part of what the anarch is. That's kind of what Venator's doing, right? He's tuning in, he's paying a lot of attention, he's turning on the luminar at least, and he's sort of ready to drop out.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, to what you were saying then, maybe with the anarch, it's not that he's not willing to fight for anything. It's more he won't be interpolated. I think the
Right. No, that's really well put. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Althusser also pairs well with this. I think that is what he refuses to participate in, to be addressed by some ideological system, and because he is addressed, he is then forced to fight for it. And I think maybe that's what that's the core of what he refuses.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a radical individualism in a way, right? I mean,
well, not even in a way. Like, he's got a whole chapter about how much he likes Max Stirner.
Right. Yeah. Right. Who's even a guy who even other individualists are like, well, that's a bit much, isn't it? Yeah. But I mean, but part of it too is like, I think you made a good point sort of earlier on in this discussion, and I think it's worth sort of like reiterating. I mean, part of the non-participation is this interpolation thing, and just to sort of highlight it, it's like he's also suggesting, not so much in this book, but definitely in the Forest Passage, that like part of your urge to participate in the thing is you've been manipulated by the thing to think that, right? And so it's like you've been tricked into, like, I mean, I'm an American. We've fought a bunch of stupid wars over the last like 50 years, and
I'm Australian. We were right there with you.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, exactly. So, and it's like, I think my dad fought in Vietnam, right? He was drafted into Vietnam. He was a combat veteran of Vietnam, and it's like, he did it. Okay, like, was that really patriotic duty? I don't think he really feels like it was. I mean, I would have to ask him this directly, and I never really have, and maybe I should. But I think he felt like he got tricked into it, basically. Like, he got manipulated, propagandized into it, thinking it was a good idea. I don't even think he could have explained to you what he was doing there when it was happening. I don't think it was until later that he was able to sort of start drawing connections. So I think it's partially that too. It's like, just don't get tricked would be, I think, the first sort of anarch move. But
and then also have I don't think it's accidental that Jünger uses people to represent various ideas. So sure, there's the craft aspect. Like, it's just it's a way of imparting information that authors know works. To have like, okay, well, this is the anarch man, and this is the liberal man, and this is the tyrant man, and just use these particular characters to represent various ideas. But I think in the case of Eumeswil, it also goes deeper in that Venator trusts people, or he feels some sort of allegiance to people, but not to any grand idea. Sort of I guess just because he keeps talking about Stirner, what Stirner would have said was a spook. Right. He doesn't have those. He doesn't feel those bonds, or doesn't think that they bind him. But it's like when he said with the Condor, it's, if it comes to it, I'll defend him as a personal matter.
Right. He's a guy that he knows. Yeah. Right, which is much different than like a political leader who I have to defend for political or nationalistic or patriotic reasons or whatever.
Hence why I don't think he addresses this, but I don't think it's an unreasonable claim. I don't think he would say, don't defend your family or your friends if something were to happen. I think it's categorically different.
I think
if you get drafted.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And there are, yes, I think that's very true. And I think a guy like Jünger might even say that sort of defending your family and friends is sort of like the highest calling. Like that's real. That's sort of like, that's what you think. That's what the part of your brain thinks you're doing in politics, is somehow like defending your people or something, but it sort of isn't. But picking up arms against the invading horde might actually be, yeah.
And it is probably, like, I mean, it just makes total sense when you consider his life that what he seems the most suspicious of are what he describes as demagogic mass movements, which so under that umbrella he considers that to be liberal democracy or fascism or communism. These mass movements which seek to, under some sort of banner, whether it's you're fighting for the folk or for your class or for some vague freedom, not the defined inner freedom of the anarch, trying to standardize large groups of people, make them all fight together. He seemed to regard that just as the most threatening thing. And
I mean, yeah, I kind of agree with him there.
And then when you consider what he lived through, it makes a whole lot of sense why throughout his novels, not just Eumeswil, that seems to be the thing he's most afraid of, because at several points he talks about that those are the ways that these titanic forces are unleashed. I think there was, I can't remember where he said, but there was some sort of quote, might have been in private correspondence, where he said that Hitler was unleashing titanic forces in Germany. And that was what really frightened him about Hitler. Yeah, he basically
believed that Hitler was something like a demon who was unleashing,
demonic.
Unleashing titanic forces for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think he meant that metaphorically, because he's so.
No, he's a mystical guy. He was having
I think he actually thought that Hitler represented some sort of demonic force.
Yeah, he was having like weird dreams to that effect, apparently. So yeah, I think he actually did think that. He called Hitler Nibolo, which is like apparently or Canibolo, which means like he who kneels to the devil. Yeah. so yeah. It's go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, you go on.
Oh yeah, the anarch idea is, I guess, sort of to try and like kind of round that out. I mean, one thing that's going on in this book is there are tons of digressions, and he's always pitting it against anarchism, right? He's not really pitting it against. It's not like instead of communism we should try this. It's like deliberately. I think he's deliberately keeping the word ism off of it, actually.
Yeah.
And instead of coming up with some whole other word that has an ism at the end, he uses this anarch thing. But he does have, there is one character, he does actually, so it's laid out like deliberately, anarchism versus anarch quite a bit, but then he does have one character who I think is actually an anarchist. And I was trying to, I'm blanking on his name. I was trying to look it up. Is the bomb maker guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's just a guy who just wants to destroy things. He's like destroying mail in the post office box, and he's like creating bombs and chemical weapons. And I think that's how Jung saw anarchism, is almost this like immaturity. It's just like destruction for destruction's sake. It's not for anything. It's not. It's like a hissy fit, sort of.
Yeah, and because I know some of our listeners will be like screaming at their headphones right now. So it's I know yes, anarchists at the moment, like they'll see themselves as anarchism is really about your relationship to the state or a body of power. And how people should be able to organize themselves without a central figure of authority. But I agree with you. I think what Jünger was doing with, I think it was like Knut Dalen.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right.
He was almost boiling it down to its essential parts. And yeah, he saw the anarchist impulse as just like a reflex against someone telling you what to do, like a violent reaction to someone telling you what to do without any further consideration. And this comes down to just like, I think, wasn't he coming up with biological weapons to just destroy books?
He was. That was one thing.
That's where he came to like liquefying people's mail, because he was testing it out in the mail service, where it's just like anything that might be a core that might nucleate some sort of stable system. The elemental immature anarchist will just lash out at, unlike the anarch who recognizes law as like a thing that exists, but doesn't recognize it as something that should necessarily bind them.
Right. Yeah.
At least I think that's what he was doing.
That's what it
Dalen
seems
was
like.
a pretty funny character, because he was just so unpleasant, so nihilistic.
He was. Well, and it's kind of funny too, is like, and I don't know what Jünger was trying to say with this, but like, he ends up getting blown up.
Yeah.
He stole this lawyer's briefcase. Yeah,
and keeps
the briefcase,
doing it.
Right, keeps doing it, and then so the guy who was, I think, sort of a prominent lawyer, if I'm remembering correctly, and so this guy sets the briefcase up to be bombed, and our anarchist friend gets blown up, but then the prominent lawyer ends up getting locked up for murder, and he gets executed. So there is this kind of, how I took that is like that sort of spirit, and we don't even have to call it anarchism necessarily, that sort of attitude, which is an attitude people have of like the destructive, oppose everything at all costs. It kind of spreads. It's like that sort of behavior ends up destabilizing people around you and catching them up in your BS to a certain extent.
Yeah. Do you think that might be the Titanic aspect of it? Because it's stripping away everything overlying that fundamental violence that Jünger seemed to think was just the background radiation of human life.
Right. Yeah, it's like I mean, the way that it seems like, it was interesting. I think this is where the sort of ideas of history and historylessness come in. It's like, I think Jünger saw history and sort of the writing of history and historicization and civilization. The thing that they had in common was that they're forces that oppose entropy, that like unless you do something, everything just kind of falls apart. And he actually has a part talking about where is it? One of the symbols of places without a history is refuse. Space is menaced by garbage, right? So like he sees these things, history and civilization, as sort of anti-entropic forces. And I think the Titanic stuff are also, but that's like the dark version of anti-entropy. It's like you're gonna square everything off. We're gonna like lose everything because we're gonna put everything in the big spreadsheet. But I think a character like the anarchist guy allows that to come in, because the reaction against that has to be like, we need to impose. Yeah, we have to impose order because we've got jerk-offs like this guy making bombs and melting everybody's mail. So we have to make rules and that everybody has to follow. And so no, I think you're right. It's maybe sort of circuitous, but I do think that's kind of how Jünger is seeing the Titanic forces making their way into society, for sure.
So I'm trying to think. So the problem with this sort of book is, I feel like this episode could be 5 hours, or we could stop it soon, because there are so many digressions that it'll just be like a short paragraph that you'll end up thinking about for the next week. It'll only be sort of related to the rest of the book. It'll just be a thought that Jünger has had at some point in his life that he's just put in some character's mouth because he wants you to hear about it.
Yeah, well, he did that a bunch with like, and I don't, my knowledge of German history is way too limited. He does this with like German history leading up to 1848, where he's just talking about a bunch of people. And I'm like, every one of these people, I have to like read their Wikipedia page because I don't know anything about them. And yeah, he does a lot of that, and it's cool. It's interesting. It's cool how he weaves it in. It's always interesting. It never stops being interesting. But my sort of cultural foreknowledge of some of it is a little limited. It makes it probably a little bit less engaging than if I was a German, for instance.
Yeah, and then there are the constant references to classical antiquity.
Yeah,
he was a very, very erudite man,
for sure,
and he just was not afraid to put it into his novels either. It's just front and center there. Basically everything symbolizes something. Yeah,
and you can sort of spend your time. This is like a good book to read with like a web browser next to you, with a Luminar right next to you, so you can like double click on some of this stuff and go a little bit further down the rabbit hole. It's a great book for that, actually.
Probably also a really good book. You could probably read this over a period of a year.
Yeah.
Because you don't really need to be remembering events.
No, not really.
And all that. You could read this really slowly, and I don't think it would detract from your enjoyment of the book at all.
No. It would. Yeah, I think it would definitely work like that. Even recurrent characters. I mean, as long as you sort of remember who the Condor is and a couple of other people, you're probably good.
Yeah, or the Yellow Khan, who's just this sinister presence to the east.
Right. Yeah, they show up like their whole foreign policy is just like make sure that the Yellow Khan likes us, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like.
That is actually just it.
Yeah. Yeah, so they don't get just run over. Yeah. But there's one thing, I don't know if you noticed this. Did you notice how much animal stuff was in this book?
Yeah, and again, it just is just so symbolic because you have the I think it was Rosner, the is a zoologist, and he understands animals as a scientist or as a technician, and this is put against Attila, who understands animals mythologically, and there are just constant discussions about especially birds.
Yes. Well, and they bring like one night late at night the condor, obviously who's the condor. I think there was an article in whatever the controlled opposition newspaper
in the Wren.
The Wren, that everybody reads but nobody is subscribed to, and or very few people are subscribed to. And there's a article in there against the condor, but it's talking about a condor and all of the negative attributes of the actual animal. And so they bring Rosner into the night bar like middle of the night and are like, tell us about a condor. He's basically Rosner's supposed to like,
and why they're so good.
Right, yeah, exactly. Rosner's supposed to like transmogrify, turn it into this like regal, noble, admirable kind of animal. It's really pretty funny, but also like kind of brilliantly done. You can feel Jünger Jünger sort of playing these metaphors like musical notes and manipulating them and stretching them and bending them. It's really pretty cool.
And again, given his view of the world, there's so much additional symbolism to invoking a metaphor. Just this entire unchanging world beneath something like talking about a bird and the additional mythological meanings of it.
Right, yeah, because for Jünger, it's not. I don't think it's just like a sort of poetic convenience. I think it's like actually trying to understand it at the metaphorical level. Like you were tapping into some phenomenological realm that is operative in our world in some way. There's a sort of hermetic quality to his thinking in this, where it's like saying somebody is a bird isn't just like, oh, they happen to look vaguely like a bird. He's tying in like every mention of a bird ever sort of into their being. It's pretty it's pretty fascinating.
And I wonder...
And he has other animals. He has other animals in it too. So like everybody has an animal assigned to them. Venator is like a little mouse, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like a little mouse. Condor is the condor, obviously. Attila is a unicorn, which is cool because the unicorn's not quote unquote real. And there's a couple other people that get associated.
And
with
then
animals
importantly,
as well.
isn't the domo just himself?
Yes, I think the domo
just
is
domo.
just himself. Yeah.
Because there's no metaphor to him. He is purely in the physical world. He just does not
no
care.
layers. Yeah, he has no layers at all. Yeah.
He's just pure technique.
I love that. I love that part. And then you know, there's the other animal thing that gets played really well is the fossilized. Is it a fossilized tribolite?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that you don't think of it as an animal really, but it gets wielded as this like sort of powerful like trans-historical symbol, right? Because it's millions and millions and millions of years old, and it kind of ties. I would almost have to revisit the passage to remember exactly what he's doing, but it does seem like it's sort of symbolically tying this whole world together and like putting it in a coordinate in history, but also sort of dislodging it from history because it's like, you know, whatever. There's been all of human history up till the cataclysm, everything since then, and yet this fossil, this animal, has sort of existed ignorant of us and uncaring about us the entire time. Yeah, that's the thing. Jünger can do this. He'll write for 4 pages on the German Revolution of 1848, and then he's giving you some less, like, almost completely inscrutable animal allegory.
Yeah, and these bits, it'll either be in the same paragraph, he'll be talking about both, or they'll be like one after the other, and you're just left thinking, okay, how are these things linked?
Yeah,
and they will be. There'll be some connection, but he often makes you work for it.
Yeah, for sure.
And there are certain sections that I've read and I just thought, hey, I actually don't know what you're saying here. Like, I don't know what you're wanting me to take away from this. It will be completely inscrutable.
Yeah. Well, that's like I said, like some of the very specific German history stuff. I'm like, man, I don't know what this is like. I'm sure this is meaningful, but like, I don't really know what he's trying to tell me here. He goes off on a whole thing about the philosopher Fourier's
yeah, that's right, the phylacteries.
Communes. Yeah. I didn't know anything about that. It was like a interesting sort of phenomena, but I don't. I mean, I guess I sort of understand why he was putting that in there. But there is so many like little asides and nooks and crannies to the thing. You can take it so many different directions. I mean, that's one of the things that's so cool about it, really. Yeah. It's it feels like a jewel box. It really does. Yeah. And this is like something that puts it like firmly into like, to me, and maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but this puts it like firmly into like postmodern, the sort of postmodern category. I think Jünger has a lot of the sensibilities of the modernist, but like this is like intellectual adventurism. Like it's weirdly it's like more allegorical than probably anything else that would have been written around at the same time, and yet it's somehow it uses that to kind of punch through all of it to somewhere else. It's really remarkable. It's kind of remarkable that it works too, that you actually keep flipping the pages.
It's a bizarre book, and the more I talk about it, the more bizarre it seems, because again, like it's barely a novel. It fits pretty uncomfortably into any sort of literary movement.
I mean, if you put it on a shelf with like, it really is. If you put it on a shelf with like we were saying earlier, like on the shelf with like all the other utopian or post-apocalyptic literature, it's like it doesn't really belong there.
Yeah,
in a way, any way I could tell, you know.
The only place it really belongs is in the context of Junger's other books. Like if you've read On the Marble Cliffs or The Glass Bees, or The Forest Passage, you can see the trajectory very clearly. It makes a lot of sense there. But then in terms of a broader literary movement, maybe in Germany, There are just more books like this that I'm not aware of. But
I have not really read that much German stuff, so that could very well be. I mean, what do you make of? I'm for a while I was sort of interested in this more broadly speaking, but now I'm kind of realizing so many people did it. The Luminar, I think, it's sort of like prescient about the internet, right? But like, what do you make? How would you describe the? I'm asking you questions, but how do you describe the Luminar?
It seems to be this device that can be used in two ways. You can either be this. It's sort of like a search tool, where it can bring up, in response to specific queries about history, specific documents or images, that people like Kessmuller will use it in that way. And then people like Vigo and Venator will use it to reconstruct three-dimensional scenes. And he talks about walking around on streets in Berlin in 1848, or in Paris, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in the past. So
it's got like a virtual reality element.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's why I've heard this book described as sci-fi, but I just don't think it fits. And I think the people describing it as science fiction look at something like the Luminar, and then the phonophores, which are basically like mobile phones.
Yeah.
And latch onto that. But I just think those things are so... It's not really about technology. Both those things just seem to be basically barely fleshed out authorial conceits so that Jünger can talk about the particular things he wants to talk about. And he's like, there's this magic machine that can just pull stuff up from the past.
Right.
Sometimes you can walk around in the past, and I'm just not going to explain myself any further because it's not important how it works.
No, there's no attempt to explain it as a technology. There's no and it doesn't seem, and it's also like, it's only like him and some other people, like only a handful of people even have access to it, right? So it's not like, it's not like a commonly available technology for everybody.
But he and also no one in the book is interested in how it works either.
No, nobody
which
cares.
I thought was
nobody cares, but nobody cares but Venator and like other history people. It'd be like a micro. If societally it functions more like a microfiche in a history library.
Yeah,
and yet it's like almost this miraculous piece of technology. Which I wonder. It is interesting that Jünger has these opinions on the sort of titanic forces of technology. Then he puts this Luminar in there, and it makes no insidious associations about it, right? There's no but it's actually bad for any reason. I wonder, like as a writer, because he also in his earlier life, like pre-World War II, he had a certain degree of like technical fascination, right? Like he had some of the golly gee whiz, this stuff is cool about tech as it developed, and then became disillusioned by it. So like I wonder if the existence of the Luminar in Eumeswil is a little bit of like, he's kind of into the technology, he needs it for this like authorial conceit, but like he doesn't want to talk about it too much because he doesn't want to like fetishize it. It's like maybe if you don't say its name too, if you don't say its name too clearly, you won't like bring it into being and somehow. I don't know.
Which, I mean, that feels very much like dealing with demons.
Right? Yeah, right? Yeah. It's like you just got to keep it very light on the page, and hopefully that this way, we don't end up with a Luminar 10 years later. It did feel like a much cooler version of, I don't know if cooler, but like it felt like it had none of the downsides of the internet and and many of the upsides.
I wonder, though, because there was, I'm pretty sure there are at least two Luminars, or two ways to access it, because there's the big one where you've got all of the functionality, and then there are there's at least one lesser Luminar, and I wonder, again, this is all just there's mostly tea leaf reading because he doesn't directly address this, but he does seem to hint that lesser historians just get caught up in looking through facts and figures rather than taking in everything as a whole, which,
yeah,
I mean, because it's Jünger. That's like the forest passage, you know. Why is the forest as a metaphor so potent? Because you're not seeing individual trees. You are seeing the forest as
it's the whole thing,
as a greater entity.
Yeah.
And I feel like the lesser historians with this technology just get lost in irrelevant details, and that becomes their fetish. Whereas someone like Martin or Vigo is able to use the Luminar, and it expands their minds. Maybe that's how he viewed technology in general. It's, for most people, it's enslaving and demonic, and for a small number, it allows them to travel deeper than they could have otherwise. I'm not sure. But yeah, he was very, very ambivalent about technology as his life went on.
Yeah. Well, no, your way of putting it is like maybe there's only just like a small subset of people that can actually use the technology without getting like completely degraded or made insane by it. I think that's true to a certain. It seems like that's how the internet is.
It's where, because I think the best description of Jünger is just as a really right-wing hippie. And it's where the right-wing aspect comes in, because he very much believed in hierarchy. It was not a hierarchy based on birth or anything like that. I think it's in the Forest Passage he talks about you demonstrate that you're a member of the spiritual aristocracy by accessing the forest. It's through your actions. But he definitely believed in a rank ordering of people. And maybe it is just like there's a tiny sliver of the population who can handle technology, and then everyone else just gets wiped out by it.
Yeah, it is funny there. Yeah, I think that probably would be sort of his take. It was funny in the book, in the phonophores, you had different levels of phonophores had like different technical capabilities, and like the lowest one, all you could get were like public announcements on it.
Yeah.
you couldn't do anything else with it. So you just got like, you basically had the message of the condor getting blared at you, and then other people could use them more like cell phones. It was pretty interesting. Yeah, it's the Jungian, he's not really an egalitarian, and he definitely is like
no, absolutely not.
He definitely is an elitist for sure. But the whole right-wing hippie thing does start to, I mean, and I don't even necessarily want to answer this question, but this is one of the things that more generally I find so fascinating about Jünger, because he does contain these contradictions that force you to consider like, what are those things? And it, like you saying right-wing hippie, I'm like, yeah, he is exactly. And then I'm like, wait, what is the right wing?
What does that even mean?
What is a hippie? It forces me to start asking myself those questions. And he sort of embodies that in his life and in these works. I mean, this book makes you ask yourself, what is a novel exactly? Can a work of like political philosophy have fictional characters in it? Like what is this? What is this thing? Yeah.
I mean, it's just sui generis. Outside of the context of his own work, I just don't know anything quite like it.
No.
Which is also why recommending it to people is difficult, because I think the book is magnificent. I really like it. I think it's my favorite work of Junger's. But I probably wouldn't recommend it to many people because it's just so odd, and I wouldn't say unfriendly, but it feels almost indifferent to you as a reader. Right. Most of the time.
That's really well put. He doesn't care. He sort of doesn't care about audience in a major way. Yeah. Or plays it off. There's a certain, it seems like that. I think he probably actually is very, very concerned about how to thread things so that you are compelled to read through them. But he definitely makes it. It's kind of cold in that regard for sure.
Yeah. I definitely, if people like Junger's other novels, then pretty clearly I'd recommend it. Yeah. And if people like Spengler, I'd definitely recommend it to them, because as far as I know, there aren't other novels which kind of dramatize Spengler's ideas.
Oh, I don't think so.
Which is it's a bizarre concept, but that this book really is second volume of Decline of the West as a novel.
Interesting.
Which is,
now I got to get into that. Well, I'll look forward to your episode on it first.
Yeah. The second volume is a lot of fun. It's an exceptionally strange work.
Yeah.
But what sort of person would you recommend this book to? I mean, if you would recommend it at all. I mean, I'm kind of assuming you would recommend it to someone.
I would recommend it. I mean, I share your affinity for it. I think it's brilliant. I was excited to have a reason to read it again, and it's also one of these things where, as a writer, how to say this in a way that doesn't seem dismissive. It's like my favorite book, and this is an exaggeration, but it's something. It's like my favorite novel that I've learned the least about writing from.
It really is, yeah. It's like, what lessons are you meant to draw from it in terms of your own writing? It's almost everything he does in it I wouldn't do, because I wouldn't be confident enough that I'd make it work.
Right, same. And maybe that's the one thing I can take from it, is just a little bit of confidence. So I think that aspect of it is really interesting. But I would definitely recommend it. I mean, I think it's not recommendable, at least from my perspective, to a person who doesn't have like an interest in history and doesn't have a certain like level of political or philosophical sort of open-mindedness. Like anybody who feels like really firm in their, I'm in this sort of, I'm lodged in this ism. I don't know that I would recommend it to those people necessarily. But yeah, it's other like people that I know personally, not on the internet. I don't really know anybody I would recommend it to. I know I can think of one guy, and the reason I think of him is because he gets fascinated in like socio-political rabbit holes. Like he's the kind of guy who will sort of be like, you know what, I am really interested in like this particular school of thought in a particular decade in France, and read all about that. So he would like it because he wishes he had a Luminar, So like I think it would work for him. But other than that, it is a difficult book to recommend because it is, and yet I think most people who listen to this show, people who are enthusiastic about different sorts of writing, I think almost everybody would get something out of it that they enjoy and can get enthusiastic about.
Yeah, because I was really excited that I would be able to talk about it with someone. Yeah. And I've seen it talked about in a few places. So Getting Lit, which is a really good podcast, has an episode on Eumeswil. And then
I haven't listened to that.
Hermetics has an episode on Eumeswil as well.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I just barely see it talked about. Yeah. Probably for the reasons we've talked about. Right. It's one of the more minor or lesser known works and weirder works by an already, I think, pretty underappreciated author. So
yeah.
Makes sense why he's not talked about.
He's very little written about. I mean, one thing, so I don't know if you're familiar with JSTOR. Yeah, I somehow have JSTOR access. I don't know why.
Oh, really?
And I don't ask questions. I just have it. So I'm like, I feel like I'm not supposed to, but I do. But anyway, I always spend a little bit of, anytime I'm going to talk about a book, or I spend at least a little time on JSTOR, and depending on who they are, sometimes I spend a lot of time there. And Jünger's like doesn't exist. Like in terms of like academic writing, he's almost a non-entity, at least in the English-speaking world, I should say. I don't know about in Germany, but like American literary journals and English language literary journals, he almost doesn't exist. And it's kind of bizarre to me in a way. I mean, there's so much fodder here, even to react against it. I feel like there's so much fodder in the work of Jünger for that, but apparently they just keep ignoring him.
Yeah, I mean, academic is one thing, but even non-academic writing, I think the only thing I've read about him in English, outside of his books, was a fairly dismissive essay about him in the New Yorker, which,
really?
granted, is very unlikely to be particularly receptive to his work, but I think that's the only time I've come across him. And someone gave it to me because they'd heard me talk about him. They're like, oh, Jack might like this.
Right. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, like, when I was doing Art of Darkness, we had a conversation with the, I'm blanking on, Tess Lewis translated On the Marble Cliffs, did the new translation. Originally it was done by Stuart Hood.
Oh, did you talk to her?
And also the woman who wrote the foreword, I guess, or the introduction.
Is that to the New York Review of Books edition?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I read.
And okay, yeah, and it's great. I mean, it's a wonderful book and it's a wonderful translation. I mean, as far as I can tell. And maybe it's even better if I don't say her name. The woman who wrote the introduction, she wrote the introduction. She liked On the Marble Cliffs, but she seemed to constantly be couching it.
Pretty.
It was not
unsympathetic, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like her thing was like, this is a good book, but you probably shouldn't read Jünger. That was sort of like in very in a very exaggerated manner, summarizing her take on it. And it's sort of, I just thought, yeah, that seems to be the sort of mainstream consensus opinion is like, yeah, he's really talented, but don't be careful.
I'm glad I'm not being petty, because it's not just me, because I was a bit annoyed when I read the introduction to it, because I mean, normally when I read an introduction, you kind of expect someone to be saying, you will enter literary heaven with this book. Like they're always hyperbolic, and I like reading them oftentimes because of like the hyperbole is kind of funny. This book will fundamentally change your life. And I'll read the book and think, it was a good book. I'm fundamentally the same person. But yeah, this one was, it was exactly as you said. It was, it almost seemed like, begrudgingly she said, I guess it's a good book.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like she had to admit it, but she wasn't super happy about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. It makes you, I love, New York Review books. I love all the stuff they're putting out. I'm curious, like, what the thought process is there, because I think they've put out two. I believe they have an edition of they have an edition of the Glass Bees as well. I don't think they've put out.
Oh, that's right. They do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know. Like, I'm not sure what it just seems odd to have that introduction. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just glad they did it. So whatever. But.
Hats off to them for putting them out, because their editions are consistently some of the nicest ones.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We'll come across. But yeah, it felt odd that they
and
put out books by Jünger, and so begrudgingly, at least it felt.
Right. It's like, I guess we got
to. Maybe there was someone high up who just said, look, I want this book as an edition, and then everyone below them was unhappy about it. I don't know how these things
work. That could be the case.
It felt odd.
Yeah, that could be the case. But it's so interesting, because to me, like, when I was saying, when I first started hearing about Jünger, I was like, well, I don't know anything about him. Well, let's get into it. And I said this cartoon version of him too, that he was like some kind
German
of weird
war man.
Yeah, German war man. So he's like kind of like, he's, sort of, he's clearly on the wrong side of history. And then like the deeper you dig into it, it's like, it actually helps you understand what was going on in Germany at that time in a sort of non-cartoon level, non-History Channel level, in a much better way. Actually having to deal with the work of and life of Jünger helped me, I feel like, understand parts of the 20th century that I had a very basic handle on before I started dealing with the work of Jünger. So to me, it's like it should be brought more to the fore, because I think it adds an important dimension to everything. that went on in the last 150 years. But
yeah,
what do I
feel
know?
a little bit irritated when you'll often hear the refrain of, read books that challenge you, and then when a book that is challenging comes up, like, not like that.
Not like that. Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. Well, this is what's great. This is what's so awesome about your show, man, is you do like read the books that actually challenge you, not just like in a very like cutesy way, like, but actually challenging stuff. And yeah, that's awesome. That's what,
I think it's
that's
been
part
good
of the
for,
reason I love what you're up to.
I think it's been good for us longer term, because I've just totally lost my I've always like the gag reflex when it comes to these things. Like it just doesn't really bother me reading them. So I feel like I'm able to just I'm in a better position to evaluate them now.
Right. And yeah, you're a bit inoculated against just like, I mean, because you guys go not just like a well-written book that's on a challenging topic. It's like you guys go into full schizo land. I love it.
Yeah. I have to space those out.
Yeah.
For our sanity.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, you can't just be reading those back to back. I would be worried about you.
So before we wrap up, anything else that you want listeners to know about what you're doing, where to find you? All these things will be in the show notes as well.
Yeah, sure. Method Madness, madmethodpod.com, if you just want to get links to episodes or whatever. But I really encourage you to subscribe at wherever you listen to your stuff, Spotify, Substack, YouTube, all of that. I'm kind of exist on all of those things. And if you want to find stuff that I've written, bradkellyesque.substack.com. You can also find the Method Madness podcast there. Just recently did an episode on American Tabloid with Jacob Everett of Apocalypse Confidential. I'll be doing what I call the Madness episode on that very soon. And Madness episodes I basically just go into whatever I find interesting about the book. I go super in depth on it. Jack was kind enough to join me for a great discussion on Gerald Murnane's The Plains. I loved that conversation. And in the madness portion of that, I went super deep on like Aboriginal song lines and a bunch of other stuff sort of associated with the book. It's a journey that I take, and I bring you guys along with me. So definitely check those out. And I think that's it.
Nice. Well, yeah. Thanks very much for coming on. It's
of course, man.
It's always so much fun to find someone who'll be able to talk about these particular books with me.
This is like secretly, this is like the whole fun of the podcast stuff. It's like great when people listen, but like it's also just an excuse that I get to have conversations about a book like Eumeswil with somebody else who read it and is interested and engaged and is super smart. So, thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And for everyone listening, I really recommend Eumeswil. It's such a good book. And see you next time.